Hey there, and welcome back to Truth Talk Thursday, where I share the raw and real behind mama drama and trauma. I'm your host, Jenny Kimmel, and today I'm going deeper into episode 7, when the fantasy faded and reality set in. This part of my story wasn't defined by one dramatic blow-up. It was defined by small cracks, awkward moments, conversations that gave no answers, questions that haunted me, and the confusing mix of the fantasy and reality I was still living in. Let's dive into homecoming weekend and the homecoming parade and the awkwardness in front of everyone. So the homecoming parade runs right behind my house every year, so naturally all of our neighbors were out and about along the road watching. And that night, since he was here helping around the house, he and I walked out to watch the parade together. At that point, I knew he had told at least one neighbor what was going on with us, but I didn't know how far that story had traveled. I didn't know who knew, who didn't, who thought we were still together, and who had already heard we were separated. It was such a weird, awkward mix of emotions. We were standing there together, but not really together. I couldn't stop wondering what people thought when they looked over our way. Did they think, oh, I thought he moved out? Or did they maybe not even know what was going on and just think that maybe his truck had been gone because he was out of town working like usual? Some neighbors might not have thought anything at all. Others might have known everything, and I had no clue who was who. It all felt like the betrayal, the separation, the whole messy truth was just hanging in the air while we stood there pretending everything was fine. Then, while I was talking to one of our neighbors, one of his old friends from high school walked up and started talking to him. I was trying to carry on a conversation with my neighbor, but I was also half listening to what he was telling his old high school friend. Afterward, I asked him, "What did you say to him?" And he just casually said, "I told him we weren't together anymore." He said it like it was nothing, like it was just normal life. But to me, it was huge. My gosh, our marriage was falling apart, our life together was crumbling, and he could just say it like it wasn't even a big deal. That was baffling to me. It was like he was carrying on as if nothing had happened while I was carrying the weight of it all. That night felt different for many reasons. So later that night, after the parade, we came back to the house and he started installing the new ceiling fan while I worked in the office, and something unusual happened. For the first time in a long time, we actually talked without fighting. There was no yelling, no accusations, no defensiveness, just talking. And as strange as that sounds, it felt nice. It was weird because in that moment, he seemed like the old him again. The man I had known for over 20 years, the man I had built a family with. For a short time, it was almost like none of the betrayal or heartbreak existed, even though, of course, it always did. It was always hanging over every conversation and every moment. But that night, just talking civilly, I remembered what it was like to talk to him without chaos. That glimpse of the old him confused me even more. Because when you see flashes of who someone was, it's hard to reconcile that with who they've become. It kept me holding on to a fantasy that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to the way they used to be. The questions with no answers. That night, I asked him questions that haunted me the most. Do you still love me? Are you in love with her? His answers were the kind that cut the deepest. He would always say when I asked him if he still loved me, he would tell me, "I love you, I will always love you, but I'm not in love with you." The words that kill and cut the deepest. And when I asked if he was in love with her, he would say he didn't know. That limbo was torture. I almost thought if he would just admit it, if he just said, "Yes, Jenny, I love her," at least I'd know. At least I'd have the truth. Not that it really would have made me feel any better, but the not knowing was its own kind of hell. I was in limbo, always searching for answers, always trying to figure out the truth, but he never gave me the clarity I needed. the tournament and the money. That night, we also talked about an upcoming out-of-town tournament he was planning to go to. He assured me that she would not be going with him. I was adamant about it. I hated the thought of her being there. I hated the idea of our money being spent on her. Everything already felt so out of control, but this was one piece that I thought I could control, making sure she wasn't benefiting from money that should have been going towards our kids. It ate at me, it consumed me, and it bothered me deeply. But unfortunately, this would prove to be a lie too. The messiness of control. That night, he also admitted that he tried to get time alone to think things through, but she just wouldn't let him. I'm not sure if he was just telling me this or if this was the truth, but if the kids weren't with him, she was. He said she wanted to be with him constantly. There was never just time for him to sit alone and process everything that was happening. I remember asking him, please just give yourself a week or two, just some time to figure this out alone. But unfortunately, he never did. And that told me how tangled it had already become. He wasn't even free to think by himself anymore. The awkward promises. That same night, he told me that she didn't like him coming to the house to help out. She didn't want him around me, probably afraid of what might happen, afraid that maybe he'd change his mind. But he told me, I will always be here for you and the kids. I will always come and do whatever needs to be done around the house because my kids live here too. And yes, since then, if I call and ask for something, sometimes he comes and helps when he's available, but it's not like he promised. Looking back, I understand. I'm sure she never wanted him helping me around the house, but at the time, those words gave me temporary comfort. The reality of limbo. That night was messy, complicated, and full of contradictions. It was filled with words that gave me temporary comfort, but no real answers. It was filled with glimpses of the old him that gave me hope, while reality was still screaming at me to just let go. And that's what betrayal does. Even in the calm moments when you're not fighting, the wound is still there. It hangs over every word, every question, and every promise. That night reminded me that as nice as it was to just talk, the truth was still there, and it was still the same. I was living in limbo, searching for answers that weren't coming, holding on to pieces of the past while reality kept slipping further and further away. Fantasy versus reality. In those weeks, I lived in two very different worlds. One world was fantasy, the part of me that wanted so badly to believe we could fix this, that he would wake up one morning and say, I made a mistake. Let's put this back together. I replayed the good memories in my head like a highlight reel. I thought about the family vacations, the laughter, the everyday normal moments that we once had. And I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, those things could come back. Looking back now, I realize part of why I stayed stuck in the fantasy is because I only wanted to see the good in him. And I think it happens way too often in situations like this. We filter out all the bad, the red flags, the warning signs, because it's easier to hold on to the version of the person that we loved than to accept the reality of who they're showing us they truly are. But then there was the other world, reality. Reality was undeniable. It was the silence that filled the house when he wasn't there. It was the way his words didn't line up with his actions. It was the heaviness in my gut when I knew I was being told half-truths. Fantasy kept me safe because it felt better than facing reality, but it also kept me stuck, and the longer I stayed in it, the more I lost myself. The backup plan feeling. There's something I haven't talked much about, but it's a truth that haunted me in October. I started to feel like I was being kept around as a safety net, like maybe he was just holding on to me just in case things didn't work out with her. That realization cut deep because it made me question everything. Was he staying connected to me out of love, or was it out of convenience? Was I truly valued, or was I just the backup plan. And when you love someone, the idea that you might only be there just in case is devastating. It's humiliating. It strips away your sense of worth because you realize you're not being chosen. You're being tolerated. I wrestled with that thought consistently. Part of me wanted to deny it, to believe that that couldn't possibly be true, but another part of me knew deep down that it explained so much of the confusion, the mixed signals, the half-hearted attempts at connection. And here's the painful truth. Being someone's maybe is not the same as being someone's choice. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. How it felt in my body. Grief doesn't just live in your mind, it lives in your body. October was one of the heaviest months I can remember. I was constantly tired. I'd fall asleep only to wake up at 2 a.m. with my heart pounding, my thoughts racing. My chest felt tight all the time. I was carrying a weight I couldn't set down. There were days my stomach was in knots and food didn't even taste right. I would feel shaky and exhausted at the same time, and my whole nervous system was stuck on high alert. Even my skin felt different, like I was carrying stress right under the surface. I found myself crying in places I didn't expect, in the car, on the way to pick up the kids, in the shower, even while cooking dinner. I would just break down and cry. The tears would just come out of nowhere, like my body was releasing what my heart couldn't put into words. And that's the thing. Your body knows before your heart does. It knows when something is off. It knows when you're holding on to something that's not real. It was like my body was releasing the truth I didn't want to admit. And if you don't listen, it will force you to listen. That's when I started leaning into the help of Dr. Christy. She worked with me in ways I didn't even know I needed. She would ask me, "Where are you holding the pain?" And she meant it literally. If I told her it was in my chest, that crushing, heavy feeling I carried all day long, she would focus right there. She worked on that specific area where my pain lived, helping me release the tension I had been clinging to without even realizing. She also did acupuncture, placing those tiny needles in places that connected to all the stress and heartbreak my body was holding. She saged me, cleansing out that heaviness and darkness I felt stuck inside me. She guided me through emotional release work that let me physically let go of what I was carrying in my chest, what I had been holding onto so tightly. It wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't like one session made everything better, but slowly, piece by piece, my body started to let go. The tightness in my chest loosened, the heaviness in my shoulders eased, my tears felt less like breakdowns and more like release. Working with Dr. Christy showed me that healing isn't just mental or emotional, it's physical too. Every ounce of stress, every betrayal, every heartbreak, it all gets stored inside of us. And if we don't give it a way out, it stays there and it weighs us down. Her work helped me find ways to breathe again, to literally feel lighter in my own skin. And it taught me that heartbreak happens in our hearts, but healing often starts in our bodies. The turning point. There was one night I'll never forget. I was sitting alone in the living room and it hit me like a wave. This is real. He's not coming back like I hoped. And this marriage is not going to be saved by me pretending everything's okay. It was like my heart finally caught up with what my body had been screaming all along. And as much as it hurt, and believe me, it hurt more than I can put into words, something shifted in me. Because once the fantasy fades, as heartbreaking as it is, you can finally start dealing with what's real. Facing reality doesn't mean you stop hurting. It doesn't mean you stop wishing things were different. But it does mean you stop pouring your energy into an illusion. You stop fighting for something that no longer exists. And that's where the healing process begins. It was crushing, but it was also freeing. Because once the fantasy fades, you stop fighting for an illusion. The hardest truth. Here's the truth I want to share with you. Reality is heavy, but it's also freeing. When the fantasy faded, I stopped fighting for the illusion. I stopped replaying old stories and started telling myself new ones. I began to ask, who am I without this? What does my life look like if I stop waiting for him to change and start changing myself instead? And something else I've always told my kids, something it took me a long time to truly understand myself, is this: anger is just unprocessed hurt, pain with nowhere else to go. When you can't process the pain, it shows up as anger. It feels easier to throw up a wall and stay angry because then you don't have to sit with the pain. But the truth is, letting yourself feel the hurt is actually so freeing. Once you do, the weight starts to lift. That's why I try to remind myself and my kids that anger isn't the end point. It's just a doorway into the real healing work. The hardest truth is this: you can't rebuild a life on fantasy. You can only rebuild it on what's real. And sometimes reality feels like a wrecking ball, but other times reality is the foundation you didn't know you needed. Thanksgiving 2022. Just a little bit of a flashback to the prior year, the prior Thanksgiving. That's when I feel like the distance started. Looking back now, I think the cracks started even earlier than I realized at the time. Thanksgiving of 2022 was right after my dad passed away. Literally, I believe like 10 days after my dad passed away. And it should have been a time when family leaned in closer to one another, but that's when I started to notice him pulling away. It's strange because at the time, I couldn't put my finger on it. I was grieving my dad, trying to keep the holidays together for my kids, and I was so wrapped up in making sure my mom and my kids were okay. But underneath all of that, there was this undercurrent, this sense that he really wasn't present with us anymore. Now, with that hindsight, I can see that was the beginning. It was subtle, but the pulling away had already started. And it makes me wonder, was he already drifting towards someone else even then? Or was it just the weight of the responsibility that made him check out? I'll probably never know the full truth, but I do know this. That holiday, one of the hardest of my life, the first one without my dad, was also the one where I began to feel the quiet unraveling of my marriage. So if you're in that place right now, if you're still holding on to a fantasy of what could be, what should have been, or what used to be, I want you to hear me. You are not weak for holding on. You're not crazy for hoping. That's just love trying to find its way. But when you're ready, reality will be there waiting. And while it may feel like the end of your story, it's really just the beginning. It's the beginning of finding your strength, the beginning of rediscovering yourself, the beginning of rebuilding something new, something true, something that's yours. As always, thank you for letting me share my story with you today. My hope is that by being real about my story, you feel less alone in yours. One more thing, I've got something special coming your way. I will be dropping a video tomorrow about a Mama Drama and Trauma self-care bundle giveaway, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. So keep an eye out and be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And as always, I leave you with this reminder: you are strong, you are worthy, and your story matters. Until next time, take care of you.